Let's turn to migration matters now. European leaders are gathered in Brussels for an informal meeting. It's aimed at paving the way to a deal on the management of migration. That comes amid escalating tensions between European nations over the influx of migrants from the Middle East and Africa. The EU is also aiming to strike deals with North African countries to establish detention centres there, although that plan has been met with resistance from North African nations. Frontier countries like Italy want more assistance from EU member states when it comes to border protection and sharing the burden of migration. Europe is currently divided over migration, so experts say an EU-wide agreement on migration is unlikely. Well, let's get you more now on that story. I'm joined live from Brussels by our correspondent, Mariam Zaidi. Mariam, of course, it doesn't seem that many people are very optimistic at this point, considering just how divided Europe is over the issue of migration. How likely is it that the summit will produce any results?
Hi, Lindsay. Well, you're probably more than enough aware that the migration problem that Europe has is something that has never really gone away or been resolved. And the problem with this hastily put together last-minute summit is that the summit doesn't appear to be able to really find the solutions that are needed. Draft proposals that were leaked ahead of today show that it's the same old, just sort of wrapped up in different kind of language. And also, the EU works by consensus. Now, here, not every member state is attending. We know, of course, that the Visegrad 4 group, so that's the Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland and Slovakia, are not going to be attending. And then another point, it's a summit convened by the EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker, not by Donald Tusk, the EU Council President. And it's on the behest of Europe's diminishing de facto chief, German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Now, she's, of course, under a lot of pressure from her Bavarian sister party, the Christian Social Union, who are threatening to turn back migrants if she can't find a solution within a few weeks. We know that, of course, France have given the idea that they could maybe take in Germany's migrants. Then, of course, you also have Italy. Now, we've seen the populist government have taken a different approach on migration by turning ships away, and the Italian Prime Minister has confirmed to be attending, but he doesn't want there to be a joint statement of the participating countries, plus he wants the discussion to centre around Italian proposals. So that means he wants to talk about how to close Italy and Europe to migrants rather than about taking those in who were previously registered, say, for example, in Italy and back to Germany. So the new Italian Prime Minister seems to be coming to also shake things up and to maybe tear up the ideas of Germany and France who are trying to control the migration issue. So right now it's really hard to see what really can come out of this.
Indeed, some competing interests there. But we know, of course, that one possible solution that's being touted is to convince North African countries to start hosting detention centres. How likely is it that they'll be able to convince these North African countries to do this?
Well, Linda, it's not really, you could say, a new idea. These sort of deals have been in place before. The EU Commission have, of course, tried and failed themselves to impose a refugee quota system on EU member states. So they know what hasn't worked in the past. And of course, what has worked and stopped this massive flow of refugees into Europe have been the deal with third countries. So, for example, like with Turkey. Plus, even the Visegrad group, who are not so in favour of taking in refugees or migrants, they're happy to finance securing the EU's external borders. So in this, in the draft guidelines that we've seen for this mini summit and also for the big EU leader summit next week, they have proposals to create a regional disembarkation scheme. So that entails North African countries such as Algeria, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Niger and Morocco to screen migrants and then stop them coming to Italy. So it'll allow the EU to separate what it calls economic migrants from refugees. And then importantly, it prevents the migrants, you could call them, from their secondary movement across internal borders of the EU. So, the European Commissioner for Migration, we've heard him say, Dimitris Avramopoulos, that he's against creating a Guantanamo Bay in Europe for migrants. And also, in these last few weeks, for example, there was an EU Development Days. The EU, of course, is one of the biggest donors to Africa. And what we saw there at this sort of big Development Day conference was the EU trying to move away from calling itself a donor of Africa to saying that it's a partner of Africa. So perhaps through migration deals with North African countries, they can put money into development and incentivize people to stay in Africa rather than head off to Europe.
Well, thank you so much, Mariam Zaidi, following that story for us from Brussels.